Good. Fantastic. Can you actually hear me? Amazing. Wicked. Thank you so much. So, ladies and gents, thank you very much for listening to me and putting up with me for the last 5 minutes. Please, can we fast forward a couple of slides so I can talk to the audience about what is OOPS? So, OOPS, thank you very much for joining us. This is now our 12th event. Our last event was in Belfast, where we're trying to now take OOPS international. Hopefully, with any luck, between myself and the rest of the OOPS organisers, we can get to at least as far afield as India, but you never know. Maybe we'll do another one in Belfast. But OOPS is a learning and networking platform that started in 2022, and it's for anyone, regardless of what industry they're in, and it's about learning from people who are in the incident response, the service delivery, and the service reliability community. So it doesn't matter whether you're actually in tech or whether you're in some form of healthcare or anything like that. We're really interested in learning about all walks of different communities and how people deal with incident response in those communities. Our mission is interesting. Our mission is to be the number one destination for the technology engineering community, so that we can share ideas in a room where actually we've got like-minded individuals who want to learn from each other and how we can actually best invest in resilience and build relationships, right? So I guess the next was, what are we going to expect from these events? New seating. This is our second event at Trainline, and it's a third. Wow, excellent. This is our third event at the Trainline offices, and I thank you very much to all of the Trainline team for hosting us. I have noticed that we've got some new seating, so definitely expect new seating at the next event. But no, I think it's really about having those difficult conversations around unspoken challenges, what we're doing within the IT response domain, not just within finance, but also anywhere else that is dealing with incident response, right? And it's really about how do we progress IT incident response and learn from each other. And I think that's the big takeaway from this, is around learning from each other. And then obviously we have the ability to network, have fun, have some pizzas. So thank you very much to the folks at Trainline for putting on the pizzas and drinks for this evening. I just want to introduce you to the team at OOPS and who they are. I think actually this photo previously was from where we were here, but I could be wrong. So the team at OOPS is Jack Moore, who is from WeShape. WeShape is a consultancy looking at technology consultancy. We've got Marilyn Kruger, who is from IG Group. She's a service delivery manager. Myself, I'm also from IG Group, head of technology risk and control, and Hamed Silatani, who is the founder and CEO of Uptime Labs, one of our sponsors. So I'm gonna go through to our panel this evening. So we've got a really, really interesting panel this evening. So we've got Pavel. Pavel came in as a guest at the last OOPS, the one before last, and spoke to Pavel and we're like, hey, how can we get you in? You've got some really great ideas, really great topics, so I really hope you enjoy the conversation today. You got Jamie from Trainline. Good to see you, Jamie. And then Dylan from Overmind. I'm so sorry. Dylan from Overmind. You got Marek and Hamed as well. So I just want to say thank you very much for everyone. If you'd like to come up, take your seats while we say a few thank yous to our sponsors. Our sponsors for this evening are Uptime Labs, WeShape, Kyndryl, and PagerDuty, who I will invite to come up and say a few words. Whilst, Tim, are you going to come up and say a few words? So before you come up, whilst you're saying a few words, if you could scan the QR code, please, and just share your thoughts on what you want to see, what you want to hear from our future events. That would be really, really useful. But please do spend some time listening to Tim, because I'm sure I know he's got some really cool insight to talk.
Only 1 minute, and I don't know quite how to follow that, to be candid. We'll do a quick, oh my goodness me, we'll do a quick check. Who's got PagerDuty on their phone today? Excellent, there's quite a few of you. I would have given you swag, but I put the swag out earlier, and I think the best thing I've got is a few socks left. So if those of you who haven't heard of PagerDuty, but most people in the incident response space have, we are an incident response platform. I normally refer to it as operational resiliency. We've been going for 15 years now, so really kind of opened up the space of DevOps and incident response as well. Most folks also think they know PagerDuty. So my biggest takeaway that I want you to have from my little conversation for 1 minute, if you think you know PagerDuty, have a look again. We've done a lot of investments in the full end-to-end incident response flows. We've done a lot as well in that horrible, I think I'm now the first one to say AI up on this stage. So all the beautiful machine learning, Gen AI and agentic AI is with us. So if you're interested as well, we can give you some insight into that as well. But yeah, looking forward to the panel session. It's going to be a great evening, and thanks for joining us. I think team, who's up next?
We go first to just introductions.
Nice. It's a very informal meeting.
Yeah. All right. No, I think I'm mic'd up. So. All right. Hello, everyone. Let's just start the talk. Next slide. Excellent. So people typically want to know, like, why listen to this guy? I think we had some couple conversations already, but a quick intro. My journey started as a contributor to Chromium. And I was essentially a recruiter, like, hey, Pavel, do you want to work for us? And I'm really proud of that. And we're some really great team that really shaped me. And then next slide. And this is what I'm doing today. So I'm advising startups, speaking at SR Day, at events like this, enjoying Dubai. That was really fun photo from Desert Safari. I really recommend that. I'm also involved in the Portfolio Collective, which is founded by another Google colleague. And we're creating the future of work. And I'm currently, working through some mentorship program there as well. So keep learning, keep growing. And I'll share with you guys some of the things from the past 12 years. Next slide. All right. This should look familiar, doesn't it? So what I often saw in teams are these kind of patterns where we go by convenience, right? It's like, oh, things are terrible when the outage is happening. When it's over, it's like, oh, I have work to do. I have other things. Maybe it wasn't so bad. Or maybe, we rationalize a lot of things, essentially. And we have this short-term memory, right? So it's like, people panic a bit, but then they calm down. They process it more emotionally than rationally. And one of my topics is, we're engineers. We're not like this Haggis dog, right? And it's like, oh yeah, it's sunny now, I can relax, I'll forget about the rain. Don't be like that. Next slide. This is more interesting because there are two things here. Like, all good engineers I talk to want to be like the guy who puts out the fire immediately. And then we learn the career incentives. Right? We kind of learn, your impact, there's lots of noise, there's lots of things happening, it's more visible, it draws more attention. So I kind of try to navigate that now. And then as leaders, we also see, how will people respond, right? So we're kind of sometimes at the top, sometimes in the middle, it can really depend. But we see those incentives where, the context in our head doesn't necessarily match other people's story. And it's really interesting to navigate. And heroics is bad. Next slide. So there is a guy I follow. He's called Shreyas Doshi. He wrote a great article, I will link at the end, on preventable problems paradox. And it's like, I've been wrestling about those, like, how does this make sense? Especially in Chrome, there are many interesting things. Ask me afterwards. But like, his summary makes more sense to me. So we see a lot of problem solving, and you see that. It's like, what did you do? I solved this problem, this big, painful problem, right? And it seems difficult. It's like people think, oh, if I face this problem, if there was this outage, what I have done, it's so mysterious, right? And then there's a fix, like 5,000 lines of code, whatever, big patches, big changes, graphs, right? It looks just thrilling and important to your company. And prevention, it's like, that looks easy, it's invisible. I mean, a lot of my work is actually, it's like proper engineering, good communication, do the right thing. Like there is no secret in it, right? And I still stand by the idea that success is mastering the basics, so that's the gist of it. Another aspect of prevention is that it feels unnecessary, right? It's like, why do we have to fix it? Nothing is burning. It's not a big problem now. I have many bigger problems. It's kind of boring also, right? It's like, we all have those stories, right? But the stories come from the times that shouldn't be there. Like people, typical people, want software to work, right? And then what happens in our teams is typically, oh, things are working, maybe it's easy. Maybe we're not pushing hard enough. And there is some truth to that. But I'll just leave this contrast here between solving and prevention. And we'll talk some solutions afterwards. Next slide. Okay, so the first few should probably seem familiar. Who knows the barbershop riddle? A little show of hands. No one. Okay, we're learning. That's good. So the riddle goes like this. There is a little town in the middle of nowhere, and there are only 2 barbershops in it. There's one on the left, and you see this, scruffy-looking guy. It doesn't look very inviting. And then there's fantastic barbershop on the right. The guy has a perfect haircut. It's a very tidy place. It looks perfect. Okay, so you have the left and the right. Who wants to go to the left one? Raise your hand.
Standing on the queue.
All right. Oh, I think we talked before. Okay. Who wants to go to the right one? Okay. So the solution to this is you're going to look like the guy on the right, on the left. And why is that? Because there are only 2 barbers. You can't cut your own hair, right? So, the guy on the left, and it's distracting that his shop looks so terrible, right? But, that's the result of the other guy's haircut. And the one who looks good, you need to look who cut his hair, right? So, long story short, you can look it up afterwards. Look beyond the surface, right? Like sometimes we look at people who either jump into issues or they never run into issues or they blame someone else. Sometimes they're messy, right? There is this engineer and you don't know what they're doing. And there is this other organized guy always ready with a brag sheet and they have a great story. And it's like, look beyond that because a lot of situations I've seen happening resembles that riddle. It's like you may promote the wrong guy, you may fire the wrong guy, you may, kind of encourage the wrong behavior. So I'll leave it there. It's a riddle. It's a fun riddle to me. And now you know it. Next slide. All right. Who heard the analogy of haunted graveyards? All right. No, we're learning. This is something from Google specifically, and we talked about it a lot. So haunted graveyards, or you can think fragile code. It's interchangeable, though not exactly. It's so areas, right? It's like, oh, you laid off the guy who owned that service. It's a real story from today, right? And it broke. Oops, what do you do? Or there is this really tricky piece of code, right? It's long, complex, it accumulated like this dreaded tech debt, and no one wants to touch it. Why don't people want to touch it, right? It's like, to me, when I was early in my career, I was like, hey, this is awesome, I'll jump it, I'll fix all those problems, of course. Until you break, right? It breaks on your watch, you're the last one to touch it, someone blames you, and it kind of sticks. It's like, oh, now you're like breaking things. Is it service? Is it you? Is it both? People kind of simplify that story. They will not look into the context. You were the last one who touched it. So we'll talk about patterns. I'm a big believer in cleaning up those, graveyards, like draining the swamp. Okay, haunted graveyards, will stick to that. But, consider those second order consequences, right? It's like sometimes seems like too messy to touch, right? It's like there are always many pressing problems, but this is also creating other dynamics in your team. When you leave those areas that are unclearly owned, there are known issues, people don't want to touch it, there's kind of unease, and goes way deeper, but I'm just highlighting those things. Next slide. This is a really, really interesting one, but I think it's really key. So we kind of keep, jumping deeper into the rabbit hole. We'll see if we come out on the other end. I have my panel colleagues, after all. But who heard of the Karpman drama triangle? All right, look it up. It's a much, much deeper topic, but especially in my Chrome infrastructure work, the team was heavily underinvested. And we started getting into some of those dynamics. So there was heroics, right? It's like, oh, I will fix it because no one else can. And seems innocuous, right? But the gist of what I want to tell you today is like, even if you don't intend it, the other tool will typically come up. So it's like a serve rinse forcing dynamics in people. You start seeing victims, and it's a very bad thing. You never want that in the workplace. And you will see villains. So, when people blame someone for touching the haunted graveyard, when the hero becomes the villain, it's like, oh, you're all over the place. What are you doing? We don't understand that. You make other people look bad. Or, you surface problems you would rather conveniently sweep under the rug, right? Or, heroes, in a way, enable those other behaviors. When people, for example, don't take full responsibility, right? So something I've learned, being a hero for a little bit, I'll admit that, is that, you end up enable behavior that you cancel each other out, right? Like the more you clean up, the more mess other people make. And then it's like, what have you done? Things seem to be standing still, right? Like you might end up in that place. You might end up being confused with the villain. You might end up creating all of those three people at a workplace, which there shouldn't really be. And I'll just leave it there. It's a much deeper topic, but watch out for it. It happens more often than you think. This is another interesting one, which taps into this. And this is so rarely spoken about. I thought someone has to say it. So, maybe partially because I'm no longer like at any of the bigger firms. I'm independent consultant. I can say these things more openly. But check this out. This is an article by someone else. But there are those fear-driven environments. And I've spent too much energy trying to convince people like, hey, look, this is broken. This is affecting the business. This is exactly what's happening. And this is what we need to do. And I was super surprised it isn't hitting. Should I make it more, ramp it up? What should I do? Often, you don't attack it frontally. You need to realize people are anxious. They won't show that, of course, right? But typically, there are lots of those undercurrents, which I've been highlighting so far. And you sometimes need to build allies. That's the conclusion I came up with. And, as an engineer, it's kind of hard because planes fly and bridges stand because there is solid engineering behind it, right? So no matter how many allies you have, it works or it doesn't. But in practice, you want to have people on your side. You want them to feel you're on your side. You want them to feel some kind of connection. So it's this touchy-feely, beyond engineering and beyond the cerebral thing. But check it out, consider it, think about it. This is something I missed 7 years ago or something. No one told me. I'm sharing it with you guys. There is a link, you can follow it, you can explore it. And many colleagues I talk with now, the peer groups, confirm the thing. It's like you build those allyships and kind of, establish that you're working together. Next slide. All right, so there is a little picture here, but the idea is the Abilene paradox. Who heard of it? Great, so, all new things, you'll definitely come out with things to explore. So this is the other extreme, right? We talked about villains, we talked about conflicts, we talked about fear, right? What's the opposite? People kind of overcorrect. and they become over agreeable. Someone says an idea. It's like, yay, awesome idea. Let's do it, right? Or someone said, oh, this is a problem. Of course it is, right? They don't challenge things. They just go along, they get along. They go with what's more convenient, right? I mean, I will make this analogy, but there is sometimes, like a mounting debt, for example, right? Or expanding budgets. It's like, these are unpopular ideas when you need to make a reform, let's say, and it's so convenient to just kick the can down the road, right? It's so convenient. Who wants to be the guy who said, no, let's cut the budget. Let's make some hard calls, right? So don't overcorrect. Next slide. And this is closely related one, right? It's like we're incentivized to be brief, right? Like there are many nuance. I discussed a lot of nuance with you today, but often, especially as leaders, we don't have much time. We try to convey a thought, sometimes a very encompassing thought, and it's like tends to be an easy answer, right? But these simple answers, like, oh, let's just fire this guy, or like, let's rewrite everything, or like it's not really a problem, right? Or I mean, there are tons of excuses, right? And they sound so great, they sound so tempting. I think we're often convinced about these things ourselves, but I think the real magic happens when you go a little deeper, and make sure your case holds, that it stands to logic, that it stands to challenge. So we'll also, afterwards, we can talk how to avoid, kind of overthinking and over discussions. But, this is a picture I stand by. Next slide. All right. And this is related as well, right? So we have those nets that, oh, of course, there are no fish smaller than us, right? Are there? Are there not? Really? There was this case from Amazon where if the caller just hung up, they wouldn't include that in the stats. And it'll be like, hey, Jeff, like everything is awesome. Our metrics say, our dashboards say, customer service is awesome. And, the anecdote I like from Amazon is like they ended up in the board meeting calling their own customer service, waiting like 20 minutes on the line. And it's like, no, something is wrong with our metrics. And I had some examples in pretty much every team I was in. It's like, oh, the dashboard is green. The metric says it's green. This dashboard says you're wrong. And I would say, no, look, I have a counterexample. Let's at least dig into this. Let's see what the metrics mean. I want to understand it end to end. Do I want a solution or do I want an excuse? Mm-hmm. See how these things tie together? All right, next slide. And finally, on the problems end, a lot of these problems don't get surfaced. And this is one of the cases where Hamed's encouragement is like, why minimizing incidents is wrong. This is one of them. Because if we minimize things and kind of, the top guys won't see anything, they'll see a perfect picture, right? It's like, imagine what kind of incident it's going to be when it finally bubbles up to the top. When you've been boiling it for so long, all of those problems have been growing and festering. And then, like when it explodes, it's going to be terrible, right? So something you want to consider is like, fix these things where they're small, where the team can fix them. Attribution and credit and recognition are problems there, right? It's like, what do people get for fixing the problems when they're small, when it's within their team, when it doesn't have CTO visibility? These are good questions. I don't have all the answers, but I'll encourage you to see things through these lines, right? Because what I'm trying to do is like we have problems that are intractable, unsolvable. It's just human nature. We just bump into issues. Are we? Or are we just blind to some dynamics, right? Or do we evade those dynamics that if we mastered, we could also master reality? Next slide. How we can do better. I'll be brief on that, and we can follow up afterwards. Next slide. So first of all, I encourage you to double down on simplicity. And I think the tide is turning. I'm really seeing the shift. SpaceX is one of those things. I love the Raptor engine. This really inspires me, and people see that, right? Like that's something tangible. If I were to describe to you something from GCP or some, big technical problem, it doesn't hit that much. I think this picture does, and there is article I really encourage you to read. But like back at Google, we had many of those jokes. It's like if it's too simple, it looks unpromotable, and people would be incentivized to create unnecessary complexity because it looks more impressive to your peers, to your colleagues, right? Like, are you trying to impress your colleagues or are you trying to do good engineering? What impresses you? It's like, I'm not impressed by complexity, by the way. Maybe by complexity of a problem, right? It's like Elon Musk is solving difficult problems. He's getting people to Mars. He's building reusable rockets. It's like, I respect that. It's a hard problem. But he does it with remarkable engineering. And that's what I try to model on a smaller scale, of course. Next slide. Who here heard of David Marquet and his book, Turn the Ship Around? Oh, great. A few of you. I hope next time we meet, it'll be all of you. If you only take one thing from the talk, just take this name, read his books, follow these prompts. One of the things he says, and we don't have time to explain it fully, right? It's like you fix the environment, not the people, right? It's like it's so easy to blame the people. Someone caused the outage. Someone, bumped into the haunted graveyard. Someone made a bad call. Someone, whatever. There is this blame thing, right? And it has consequences because then people fear, and you kind of can't really outgrow your problem because everybody's protecting themselves, and it has stories on that, and I think they're very applicable to software. Another interesting part is like bring authority to information. So we often do the opposite. It's like we ask people for reports, we ask them for updates, we try to make all the decisions ourselves. But remember, it's like what percentage of issues bubbles up to you depending on how hard you are, right? But it's like if you're not seeing all the problems even, and people live in fear, it's like, can you fix it? Can you make decisions? Are you using complete information? Just some questions. There are a couple more things here, and he really goes into details and explains those concepts. And my experience shows that you do better if you know and apply those things. Next slide. There are a couple of resources here. You can just take them afterwards. Slide will be online. I really recommend them. So you have the book. You have an interesting resource on fixing under-provisioned teams. So when you recover, they highlight that you have to time box that transformation, and you have to have real clarity on what's getting. If you lose the momentum, it all kind of falls apart. There is the Shreyas Doshi article on preventable problems. Check it out. It's fantastic. There is also Agile Conversations book. So, it's done by technical guys. It shows example. I handle conversations at work. It'll improve the quality of your conversations. If you're talking to people and it's like, oh, they don't get it. No, it's a skill. It can be learned. I believe in your colleagues and I believe in you. And I remember my own story. It's so compelling. It's like, of course I'm right. And they don't get it. And, it's like all of those things. No, we can improve it and we can communicate better to everyone's benefit. Couple more pointers. You will see them online. I share those pointers and they're really fantastic. Next slide. So just some takeaways. If you let things pile up until something breaks, it will. Of course it will. Like, think about it, right? And we do this so often, right? It's like, oh, it's easy. Let's just pile up. It still works. Okay, we pile up. We double down. And eventually something breaks. And we act surprised, like, why, right? Or sometimes the flip side of it is like, oh, if the only way I can prove engineering is doing its work is when things fail, well, they probably will. And so you have those cycles when people have to watch dashboards constantly, right? Because otherwise, like, oh, that's too easy. What are we paying you for, right? So just realize the dynamic. We can hopefully help people connect the dots, see a bit ahead, right? Another thing is like patching up, right? So you have an incident, you patch up the incident. Have you fixed all places? Have you fixed the root cause? Have you, is the system designed in an intelligible way, right? That's really that there are some fundamentals and principles that go beyond. It's like, oh, it's no longer terribly broken. Third one, it's not just the tech. And that's where I think it's interesting, right? So they're also people. So that means team dynamics. And you can say, oh, they have nothing to fear from me. Do they? They don't know you. They don't know what's in your head, right? That's a communication thing. They probably work in other environments that are blameful. And so, the more you empathize with your team, and you can realize, who do you think will tell you? It's like, no, I'm fearful I may be fired, and so I won't take this risk and surface things. Like, no one will tell that, right? So there's a paradox. Like, if you're waiting for people to escalate, if you're waiting for people to tell you things, you'll keep waiting, right? You need to be more proactive. You need to really lead, essentially. Like, when it command. I love that quote. And finally, and this is again something Hamed asked me to reinforce, so I'll do that. That's the last note and the segue to our panel, right? It's like, don't wait until it becomes an incident. Don't wait until it's terribly broken, it's a big mess, nobody knows what can be done about it, it's hard and expensive. And I'll highlight that. It's actually more expensive to fix at that stage. Look at the near misses, right? It's not like, oh, it's not an incident. Maybe it isn't, but look into it. Follow it up. Gotchas, like, oh, this is weird, this reading, it's not supposed to do that. The weak signals, you can also look that up, it's a keyword. There are some good articles on that. So, the further away from the actual incident you're fighting and the more deeply you're fixing those issues, it just works. So on that note, thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Pavel. So if I may invite the panel, Marek, Dylan, and Jamie. I normally don't influence, we're a big advocate of freedom of speech, so I don't influence what goes into presentation.
It was a nudge. A good one, though.
But it turns out, when I spoke to Pavel firstly, organizational culture has a lot to do with incident response. Okay, culture drives behavior, drives metric, and metrics drives behavior, vice versa. And how organizations deal with incidents, how well they deal with incidents, are really deeply rooted in an organizational culture. What I really took away from that talk is, I think that it was the iceberg and then the quote at the end. The bad news is good news. Exposing the incidents and talking about small things more often, it saves you from big failures. So SEV 3s and 4s are far more important than SEV 0s and 1s. So on that note, let's get to the panel. So we lost a bit of time in the beginning, so we're going to talk really, really fast. Okay, I have about 50 questions to go through. Okay. Joking. But let's start with quick introductions.
So hello everyone, I'm Marek, and I'm from Sage Group. And my job is basically keep Sage out of BBC for the wrong reasons. And what we do, we are an accounting company. So last year we won FTSE 100. So if there is any investors, you're welcome. But that's what I do.
Yeah, I'm Pavel. So just to reiterate, I've worked as a tech lead in GCP and also had very interesting experiences in Chrome. So these were the key sources of my insights.
Hey, I'm Dylan. I'm the founder and CEO of Mind. We're a startup that predicts outages at the pull request stage before you actually apply them to your infrastructure.
I'm Jamie. I'm a principal SRE here at Trendline. So you're very welcome.
Great, thanks. So you have kind of people from different backgrounds, and I call out Jamie's one. Jamie is not on call, but he loves on call people and enables them. So we all know that if we can't measure something, we can't improve it. So every organization will be thinking of, for having a measure, having a KPI, having a metric for whatever is that they're improving. And now this forum is about uptime, availability, and resiliency. So I'm going to focus that conversation on the KPIs, the measure, what we use to track improvement of our resiliency and impact of those measures. Because frankly, our industry, especially IT, is still in very early stages of maturity. to work out what needs to be measured and how those measures make a difference. Now, these measures are very important. Their impact is far beyond what we think. They drive, firstly, behavior. They say people, if you set a target, if you set a number, people will deliver it and do whatever it takes to deliver it. But if they deliver the outcome you want, you never know. So we need to bear that in mind, and I really want to dig deep into that. So let's start with a very quick icebreaker, psychometric. During my experience, career experience, I have come across two types of people. People who enjoy incidents, they take like some sort of satisfaction through that panic and stress, and people who don't and hate it. Maybe we quickly go around and see which type are you. Marek.
I love it.
I was tempted to say I love it, but I would add a caveat. It's like only in a rational environment, right? When I can reason with people and not rely on perfect hindsight.
Hate.
Hey, you don't like me.
Hate.
I'm fascinated by the definition of incident here because I don't know anyone who loves an incident properly.
I do.
Because like the gravity of the situation is what makes it stressful, I think. And I think if it's for the big ones, I don't think anyone loves them. I don't love it. I love a problem. I love problem solving, but I don't love the stress. I've been there. Yeah. I've got a lot of grey hair from it.
Okay, so we know who's the context of that conversation. But let's just start with, and again, so the set of questions that I have, as I said, our industry is pretty immature, so it might not be very specifically applied to your organization, but you can even talk through how your organization is thinking about it or not. How does your leadership currently frame service disruption? How far it matters to them? How do they measure it? How do they track it? Marek?
So I'm going to give a security angle on it because I'm from security and I know what I say might sound a bit alien to some of people, but we actually have a metric to cause disruption. And I was talking to you, Hamed, about that fact that we have even a team that is on the other side of the coin to my team that I have a gentleman's agreement with that they actually gonna cause disruption and we're gonna react to disruption. And that is agreed and supported by the higher leadership because they know that if you're gonna train, when there's gonna be a real problem, not your typical, hey, I click on the phishing and I don't know what to do, or, oh my God, my laptop got stolen, kind of like average problems, then the team will be able to go back to those learnings and react properly, right? So we actually measure a couple of things. We measure the response time, and there's classics, right? Time to response, time to react, stuff like that. We actually measure coverage because sometimes we actually see that stuff that we got hacked we didn't even see in the first place, right? And there is no blame. I know it's not mainly the question, but I want to emphasize that we don't have a blame culture in a sense that if someone did not follow the process, if someone's knowledge or experience fell short, that's acceptable. Because we are there to actually make sure that we are ready for it.
So that's, you measure, not, well, you said you're causing disruptions and tracking that. And the way I kind of interpret it is you actually measure how many learning opportunities your staff have.
Yeah,
So
because out of this, there is many things that come because we then measure coverage, right?
Yeah.
Do we have everything that was attacked under our monitoring, right? We measure reaction time, so classic time to like how quickly we've seen it, how quickly we're able to resolve it. So that's our kind of classics. Then again, if we have tooling, we measure whether there's false positives or not, right? But that is our discussion with me, so I'm not gonna talk about it now. So there is many things that we kind of measure out of this outcome.
Okay, great. So number of opportunities to learn, reaction time, and coverage. Pavel, from your, I know right now probably you're not measuring that, but from your previous experience at Google,
Yeah, I think from GCP, the clear example to use were the automated cert provisioning. So we definitely owned like a part of overall Google's SLA on that, so that all new certs provisioned would be live within a certain time. And then there was interesting twist because we ended up managing like a number of certificates renewals. So we would have dashboards on that, just kind of with more time to react, right? So both something that has to be live is covered by end-to-end tests, which I really loved. And then the background of sort of like impending scenarios where, you know, the certs are about not to renew. And we had a couple of those as well. And of course, underneath that, you have all of the standard dashboards of like, you know, the key APIs, response times, and failure rates, and all of those details.
Okay, so the first one is more business focused.
It's very much, yeah, it's provisioned with essentially minutes, actually. So, yeah.
Dylan,
So we care about impact to customers and nothing else. So I don't care about uptime and I don't care about incidents. I don't measure well, we measure uptime now because our dashboard does, but there was an accident. I care about the SLO. What percentage of our customers, when they made a request, got the request within the certain time, within certain like constraints that we consider to be a good experience. So like our product, for context, is usually in CI as part of before people decide to deploy to production. So if we go down, then they don't have the information that they need to deploy to prod. So it's very important that we deliver something and we deliver it within a certain period of time. And we measure that with an SLO. So I don't care if we're down and nobody makes a request, then like if an API falls over in a forest and no one's there to hear it, it does not make a sound, I'm convinced. If no one makes a request while we're down, we weren't down. So yeah, we only care about the number of requests and were they successful. And of course the other way, so this morning we had an incident which was one customer's requests were failing, but everybody else's were fine. Were we down? No, but this customer happens to be a POC and it's the biggest opportunity in our pipeline, so absolutely I care about it.
okay, so obsessed with customer impact.
Yep.
You measure that. Jamie.
Yeah, I love that. By the way, I love that. Again, getting into the definition of what the incident is in that case. Let me use Pavel's iceberg analogy a little bit here. So, at the very top of the iceberg, the execs will pay attention to the number of minutes of downtime that we have over a quarter, and we have some targets around that. They'll also pay attention to the amount of revenue which we might have lost if we were unavailable. Further down the iceberg, you have sort of directors, management level, who are working with a incident definition, which is a little bit more experiential, as Dylan sort of referred to, which is to do with either the number of bookings that we're taking or the number of bookings that are that we have dropped within a certain time frame. And then there's other experiential definitions which would trigger a reaction for engineers. And that is then related to the fact that, somewhat contrary to what you mentioned about Sev 3, Sev 4, we don't want to reallocate engineering time unless we believe that there's value in terms of the customer experience. So we will create that incident definition to be the trigger, and we will therefore be ignoring certain of those Sev 3, Sev 4s. And then finally, at a more engineering level, we will also measure time to detect, time to acknowledge, time probably to sort of mitigate, and time to resolve.
Okay, great. So I noted quite kind of wide range of different metrics that across the panel, the organizations measure. Again, starting just to recap for everyone here. So I think that the newest one definitely I heard was opportunities to learn, and then a lot around various sorts of reaction times, be it time to mitigate, time to recover, customer obsessed ones, impact on the customer, and some business ones, revenue, and minutes of downtime. it's interesting. No one mentioned number of incidents or frequency of incidents, which is a really pleasant surprise. Why is that? Anyone wants to take that question?
I'm going to start with that because I had number of conversations where I pitched for a tool, and when they ask me, okay, what the tool will bring to the table, I always say, we're going to have more incidents. And they were like always shocked, saying like, why you want to bring to our organization something that will gonna cause more incidents? I'm like, no, not cause, we're gonna detect more. So the more you're gonna invest, the more visibility you're gonna get. It's like the analogy with the fishnet. So basically, if we're gonna start measuring that, people will start hiding incidents and be like, no, don't look here, that's no incident here. And we don't want that behavior. We want to actually find the problems and solve the problems rather than pretend that problem doesn't exist.
And each of those, again, is opportunity to improve
Yes.
systems. Okay. Out of interest, for people in the panel, are you using any KPIs that it was not mentioned here? Anyone has one to add?
I had a slight question on that. So if you're not getting an indicator or a signal from a staging environment for what would soon be in production, and there's a bug or there's an issue that you wouldn't detect, and then you push that out to production, then it causes the issue for a customer, and then it's too late. Whereas if you have, it's not necessarily an incident staging, but if you've got a strong indicator there that it potentially would become an incident, you can pick that up earlier in the process. Again, that shouldn't be going through to page duty and signaling someone on call, but that needs to be picked up a lot earlier, I'd say. And if you're not detecting that kind of thing, because it's not affecting the customer, then it might be too late.
We are actually doing that. I didn't mention that. Yeah, we will actually.
It's a very interesting
Go on.
point. So we actually we never used to worry about what happened in staging, even if the environment went down, and we've completely changed it. So as soon as the environment goes down and our synthetic checks don't run, no one's allowed to deploy to production. We just close our production environment to any changes if staging isn't working as we'd expect it.
Okay, that's paging.
It doesn't page. So my team will get notified that staging, you're not able to go through the booking flow, and then as soon as we get that, we close our production environment to any new changes, and then tell teams to investigate what's gone wrong. Because we did have instances of people in lower environments just because the environment wasn't stable. And people were like, oh well, I can't really trust this environment. We'll just push it to prod anyway because we think ours is fine, and then causing production issues.
And the paging thing is incidental because it's, we will only pick that up. We're not a global company, so we'll only pick that up. There'll only be page or staging work done 9 to 5, 9 to 6. So there's no need to page per se because it's more about how do you communicate that. We communicate it through channels. We don't need the pager, but
we're doing a very similar thing. Like we rely heavily on automated tests in the staging environment because we're an 8-person company. It's not like there's always hundreds of people clicking around staging. You can't rely on SLOs unless you have an automated test that is clicking all the buttons for you. Automated tests are not going to find the edge cases most of the time, realistically. You are going to have to catch some stuff in prod, but we do the exact same thing, which is like if the automated tests fail in staging, nothing goes to prod. You cannot allow, I think it's called normalization of deviance. Pablo, I feel like you would know this. Which is where, if staging is always broken, you're like, man, it's always broken, I'm just going to send it. And then you get yourself in a real problem.
Okay. So you do care about incidents that are not customer impacting?
In that it stops people deploying to prod, yes.
Yeah.
And as it should, because we don't want to deploy it, but yeah, get it fixed and then get deploying to prod as quickly.
Now that I'm picking up on you, I'm going to challenge you on one other thing as well. The near misses, incidents that happen in production, but doesn't affect everyone. Do they matter or not? I've been one, and on Christmas Eve, it was a trading platform. It was a massive problem with a networking issue. It was a blip. No one got affected. Okay, but it was a big issue that needed to be dealt with, and we were then like, do we wake people up with? Do we deal with it as an incident? Is it a Sev 1? Is it not a Sev 2? Because if it happened during the daytime, working daytime, would have been a massive problem. So it was a big argument in the house to seriously take that. But I'd like to hear thoughts on near misses, how important they are. So you start with you, Dylan, and I'm going to go around.
I'd love to know what you guys. Our near misses are like, we had a near miss recently where we deployed a new web application firewall. We trusted that the AWS default rules would be reasonable, and they were not even remotely reasonable. Do not put any rules on your web application firewall by default. They are really dumb. But that got deployed to staging, and we caught it. But we caught it in a way that was like not terribly automated. We happened to notice it, and so we were very like patted ourselves on the back for happening to notice it, but weren't terribly happy that it wasn't like an automated test or something like that. But to be honest, with the rate at which we're trying to deploy stuff, catching it in staging and tapping ourselves on the back is kind of okay. I would be interested to hear like people in more mature organizations who have like a, hundreds of thousands of customers, what a near miss means. Like, does it get investigated?
I love the way when you say more mature organization, you move your look from me and just look at Jamie. But go on, Jamie.
I need to book my train tickets. I need to work.
So, I mean, I find this one fascinating because I think this highlights the tension between the academic side, the science of what you should do, and the reality, the real world reality of what you have, how much money your company has to pay people to do certain tasks every day. Because you just have to, I mean, where do you stop? If you're going to go for every single near miss, when do you actually not? And so we have, as I mentioned, this definition, which will effectively trigger a reaction from engineers. There's always a gray area where, particularly if we're during the day and we see something that we want to get ahead of, then we will be in contact with each other and we will react to it. But yeah, we have a definition that is, again, it's experiential for the customer. It's also aligned with the business because it's to do with revenue, and that will be the boundary between whether we investigate it or whether it was a near miss, which we let go. I mean, we know we're well aware of the fact that some of the P1s that we've had, or the Sev ones, existed previously as like a Sev 3 or something like that. And I was going to buy Dan a t-shirt which says, "It's not a blip, it's a mini P1." So yeah, that is the conundrum. That is the conundrum. I mean,
they say if you let so many near misses go through, you will get a P1. So one at some point.
Yeah. So but again, I say, well, how do you afford to react to every single one when you see? I mean, there's certain sort of fundamentals in a system where you will see a blip. So if it's either going to be something like a code change, which may impact the throughput of something temporarily if it hasn't properly ramped up, if it's hitting cache, or if it's if it's warming up, if it's doing something and it's not quite up to speed yet and you haven't detected that. You just could have a massive influx. You could have a bad actor who's created a bit too much traffic. This has gone under the radar of your WAF. There's a whole bunch of stuff, and there are mitigations for these things. But again, you're never going to get all the dials turned exactly. So sometimes we will see a little drop, and then it'll come back up again, and we'll go, "That's all right. We're not going to go there because we actually have most engineers focused on something."
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, this is a really good example of metrics driving behavior. Okay, if you watch revenue, customer impact, there's very little incentive to look into near misses until they hit you the other time. But Marek, looks like you're completely in the opposite. It seems like you have plenty of time at your and your team side. You're creating learning opportunities and getting people to create incidents, or effectively creating these near misses. What is driving that investment?
So an example of that, and I don't know whether that can be categorized as a near miss, is if I have a situation that our internal red team did a purple team engagement with us, and there is all this learnings about the lack of coverage, whatever. But if we just look on the evidence and the artifacts they collected on the end, and then I see our code, I can see them generating golden ticket, I can see them having most of the credentials, showing me the CEO calendar. Like, if that would be done by a hacker, the damage will be sufficient, right, for us to be under. And we can talk about ICO problems, customer revenue, investigation from the government, really, right? So that is potentially something that didn't happen because no one know about it. But internally, we kind of found that's a near miss in our books. So there is a big value in doing that. And some execs originally were actually skeptical, saying like, well, why you are trying to create problems? But I always kind of push back on that, saying we are showing you what problems we could face if we're not going to do that. And that drives then the other teams to actually patch the issues, change their processes, and do all this good stuff that cause the hackers or red team to not be able to recreate the same activity again.
Wonder if there is equivalent of that practice in non-cyber related incidents beyond. It's like, if you look at it just from kind of purely technical purposes, it's chaos engineering, wreaking havoc, and finding and fixing things. You're nodding, Dylan. Do you do a lot of that?
We don't do any chaos engineering. I don't know if any of you guys do, but I've certainly found that every time I've been caught out by an issue, it's been something so obscenely left field and complex, and like somebody a year ago created a thing which nobody told you about, and it relies on something over here. It's so complicated that like the chaos engineering thing of like I deleted an instance, it's not going to be creative enough to actually come up with the sort of things that tend to hurt me. When I get hurt, it's because something really left field happened, and I just don't trust it's going to be creative enough. If I wanted to build my services super resiliently, I would know kind of how to do it, but not resilient to like the complex failures. Do you guys do any chaos engineering? Has anyone done that before?
No, I think one example of emergent chaos engineering is actually open source. So I observed that a lot of the corporate software tends to be fragile, like if you depart from the common path and like non-standard scenarios, and people learn to stay within those bounds, right? So they keep fragile. But open source, like they'll file bugs about you. It's like, oh, I'm running it in a different configuration on my, Raspberry Pi or whatever, right? Like it will never occur to you. And you get people probing the systems from so many directions that it does get more robust. And I believe in that. And of course, in practice at work, right, you don't want to be distracted, right? You don't want too many what ifs. You don't want too many like unbounded yak expeditions where it's like, start chasing ghosts effectively. So yeah, it's a balance. It's a trade-off. So.
Do you mind expanding on what chaos theory really means? Sorry, chaos engineering really means. I mean, I understand chaos theory, but chaos engineering is a new concept.
So we do a little bit. We started doing a little bit, and effectively, we have several hundred microservices in production, and we have fairly common objects, if you will, between containers, virtual machines, S3 buckets, queues, databases, etc. So first of all, where stuff goes wrong is either going to be between the connections between those things, or with the resource that each one of those things has. And so for chaos engineering, we will either cut the connection to something and then watch what the reaction is. If it actually has a large blast radius or a small one, whether certain components basically try to protect themselves with circuit breaking or other such things. You can also overload the compute, the CPU. I believe you can effectively turn it up high within Amazon to fake a maximum CPU experience and see whether that actually creates any sort of bottleneck within the processing of the code on that piece of compute. And again, watch the ripple effect of that. So you really are trying to flush out unknowns. I mean, one of the things that I thanks to this guy, actually, I saw a talk by Dylan in a conference called Monitor Alma. What was it, 2024, 23? The unknown, your unknown unknown slide.
I think it's 3.
Okay. Had a bit of a moment in his talk where I kind of went, wow, okay, this explains so much to me about incidents and some of the challenges. And effectively, I feel like there's most incidents are a process of taking an unknown and kind of turning it into a known. Something's gone wrong, you're not sure what it is, or maybe you know something about the actual mechanism, but you didn't know it was about to occur. And you're basically processing that information and working out how to make it well known enough to solve it. So chaos engineering is effectively a method or mechanism to flush out these unknowns that you haven't spotted yet that will come and get you, like you mentioned, in terms of...
By extension, do you think there's more benefit in introducing problems yourself through chaos engineering to flush them out, or by getting something like a bug bounty service and asking people to help you discover those problems externally?
I'd say all of the above. I mean, politically, if you can do a bug bounty service, I mean, there's a lot of companies I don't think would be allowed to do that, but if you can do it, then all of the above. Because similar to what Pavel said, or maybe it's yourself, the way that these things come in, the vector of attack is varied, and so covering the whole spectrum is really what you want to do.
And I would add critically, you never want these things to affect end users. So this is often this part, and people think, oh, this is crazy. It's like, I will cause user facing. No, you know, they try not to do that. It comes from Netflix. And the idea is, at that scale, if you kill like a single pod or something, you know, there is so much redundancy at other layers that it shouldn't affect users. But you want to flush those issues out. Or sometimes, yeah, it's like, what is this printer doing in the corner, right? And it's like, let's disconnect it and find out who complains, right? It's, you know, something like that.
It's just the metaphor of like, have a monkey, give it the scissors and put it to data center for 30 minutes and then see what happens to your products. If they still work, that means that you are robust and resilient.
or the monkey's very bored.
Yeah, hungry monkey.
So I'm obsessed with this metric, okay, metrics. I'm gonna recap again and I have a follow-up question from that. So the interesting metrics so far, we heard about learning opportunities, impact on business revenue, or various other aspects, customer impact in the form of SLO, and various sorts of time to reactions. So organizations, we track these metrics, but what behavior each of these metrics drive in how an organization invests in technology and practices and how teams behave. Keen to get thoughts and examples. You know, you can pick either one of them or all of them and see how, if you can link that metric and the impact of it, or be it, I don't know, time to react, and what it means on the floor to the life of engineers or how we practice, that would be great. Don't want to put anyone on the spot.
I can start.
Go on, Pavel.
Great. So, I mean, first of all, and like I just prepared some notes here, so maybe it's easier. But don't teach people that the best way is to do nothing, and then you're never wrong, right? Like that's the wrong lesson. I don't want to incentivize that. Some example I've seen is like, you know, in Chrome we had those alerts whenever there was an infrastructure issues affecting users. I set up an alert, and we're actually supposed to do those things. I just wanted to be ahead of the users, right? So instead of them reporting the issue, we detect that. And the interaction was like, after that, some colleagues complained, hey, Pavel, this alert is noisy. Now, that's not my definition of a noisy alert, because actually every instance was an actual user issue. We just had so many, right? And you can argue, well, okay, maybe if that alert is unmanageable, we can handle it differently, and maybe we should for the adoption, right? But that doesn't mean it's noisy. It just means, you know, we're surfacing more problems that we have, and we'll sometimes have those conversations with the team where, you know, they'll go by convenience, right? So let's say the infrastructure team, if you want to make the infrastructure team happy, just make them, you know, keep it easy for them. Maybe work on the new shiny stuff, but then the rest of the team, right, the all-encompassing team, needs that infrastructure to work. Not in 3 years when the new thing is ready, but kind of now, right? So kind of bridging those gaps and seeing people, letting people see perspectives, and making sure those incentives are aligned, because maybe I'm jumping over that, right? But it's like, you know, at Google, people review their peers, right? So if you get a review from peers, like, Do you get it like, hey, your alert was really annoying, or do you get, like your alert caught the issue before I had to report it, right? It makes a big difference. So you want to be cognizant on that when under that structure and when setting up that structure. So,
Any other examples we use on metrics driving behavior?
I mean, the only metric we use is SLOs, but I think it drives. The reason that we use it is I think that it drives extreme pragmatism. Like, if somebody hits a service and the whole thing crashes, and then somebody hits again and it works, but only one person experiences that crash and nobody hits it during the time that it's down, then it only affects a tiny bit of the SLO, because realistically it only had a very small impact, even though it brought the whole thing down. If nobody tried to hit it, then it's fine. I think that's incredibly like pragmatic and practical, and I think that it drives very practical behavior.
So the bigger the issue for you is, the more you will invest in.
The more people are hitting it, the more we will invest. Even if it's like people are hitting it and it's slow versus people are hitting this and it's completely crashing the service, but that doesn't get used very often, then we would do the thing that is impacting people more, which I think is I think it drives pragmatism, which in a startup is very, very helpful. We don't want like yak shaving and academic arguments. We need to pump out features quickly, and so for us, that's very, very relevant.
I've mentioned the incident definition trigger reaction before. I'm not going to touch that one again, but the time to alert, because if in hindsight you realize that you've had a problem and for whatever reason, let's say it was actually a fairly simple fix, but the impact to the customer was significant. If for whatever reason the alerting on that was super slow, you should be concerned, because that's an easy win. And so time to actually alert is a big deal.
Time to alert.
Yeah.
And how does it impact the investment, technology investment, people investment that you're doing at Trainline?
So if that was so if we had a P1, P2 triggered, engineers refocus on that, spend their time and energy on that, dig in, we resolve it, we go to either follow up or retro, depending on what we need to do, how well we knew it. At retro, we will analyze what occurred and we'll create actions off the back of that. So if we look at the stats and realize we had a very long time to alert, we'll basically ask why, look at the logic that either didn't exist or should have been faster, and then create an action to improve that.
Great, thanks. So they do these metrics actually drive investment and efforts. So I'm conscious of time. I'm going to skip a couple of questions, only because we have Marek from security background here. And in your space, it feels to me, it's this, I can see the difference in approach, and even it showed up in the metrics that you're tracking. So the main principle, I think, is security incidents are inevitable. They're going to happen. We have problems. We have holes. So I've got to invest as much as possible to find that. Maybe not so much we are thinking about it in that way in a non-security related incident. But how that approach, how that way of thinking about incidents does shape your strategy and practices. You previously mentioned a lot of very interesting examples of like red teaming and proactively testing. That's one example. But I would just wonder at an organizational level, what else you do, what else you track?
So I'm quite picky in terms of metrics. And I'm not sure if I share the opinion, but I find most vendors do crap metrics. And I have to basically define my own. A simple example of that when investment is in scope is false positives, right? Because we've all seen the false positive ratios, right? And I always had a problem with that, because if we have two technologies, Hamed security and Marek cyber, and you're gonna generate me 50% false positives, and I'm gonna generate only 25, on the surface, your tool is worse, right? But if we're gonna then say that you generate in a week 100 tickets that are valid, and I just generate 10, that means that we're gonna get much bigger value from your tool, right? Because that's 50 tickets that are actually incident, that actually someone needs to look on it and do something about it. And that's, for me, it's gonna be 7.5, right? So that's kind of it. So I always, in terms of the metrics and what we measure, look for incentive. We look for a story. I need the story to tell me something rather than just have a bunch of like green and red percentages, current status, because that may be helpful to solve the problem at hand, but it's not helpful for me to make sure that from strategy point of view, that's what you ask is, okay, I'm gonna now invest more time or effort or money in that space of technology or detection, what have you, right? So, not sure if that answered what was you're looking for, but that's how I understood this.
It definitely helped. I was kind of, as you were talking, I was more thinking about the differentiation between resilience and robustness, and the practices that you talk about lend itself more to increasing resilience of an organization. Things will happen. If it happen, people as a source of resiliency, how to deal with it. Whereas practical approaches to high severity incidents or will drive more robustness and reliability. Like, okay, we're going to fix what we just learned happened here. If the same thing happen again, of course, we have done the fix, we have done improve the system, it won't happen again. But we are susceptible to get another surprise. And that could be on its own.
I think you can try to do both though, because then, for example, we had a meeting recently about a problem, and one of the comments was if this service A was calling service B, and service B was not available, service A could actually fall back on some hard-coded variables, let's say, and continue. And so there is that attitude of, okay, in a retro situation, first of all, what occurred? Why did it occur? Where did it go wrong? What can we fix in any process? But then what resiliency can we create around that? So there's logical resiliency in that kind of like fallback mechanism. Mm-hmm. There's also resiliency in things like trying to throttle or circuit break when you've got like a network overload of some sort. And then obviously there's resiliency in terms of compute, whether you need to scale up or scale down. And we sort of evolved through a lot of that thinking, every time we have an incident. And we've become more resilient off the back of that. So I think we do both the robustness and the resiliency. It's a case of making sure that you have people in the room who guide the conversation down that road. Because when you get maybe certain engineers in the room, particularly if they own the service, they will have that slight bias towards thinking maybe about the functionality and on what they're incentivized to do on a day-to-day basis. Whereas if you have other people in the room who can say, okay, hey, but what if we stand back and look at this from a different perspective? And so having those voices in the room, I think, is very useful.
Okay, interesting.
And if I can highlight something from Jamie, because like the discussions between what's the difference between resiliency and robustness can kind of sound esoteric, but you've described this degraded mode, right? So there is a fallback, so the system doesn't completely fail, but the service operates in like fallback mode. I think it's worth making that like shout loudly to the operators, hey, I'm operating the degraded mode. Take a look, something's going on, record that, because what can happen otherwise, you have these silent failure modes. And it's like, something fails, but you don't know what. You have those layers of retries and fallbacks, and can be really hard to reason about. So you want the system to be transparent to the operators on that.
This is a really good point, and this is again, I'm going to go back, and Dan Cook is not here because you laugh at this. I'm going to go back to the unknowns again, because I think that one of the points which kind of like stopped me and gave me a lot of pause in your talk was about the fact that as a team matures in troubleshooting, you get rid of the known problems and you start entering this realm of problems that you have not had the experience of before. And when you start adding that level of resiliency and you maybe don't flag those degraded modes, there's extra complexity, there's extra factors, which then start creating these unknowns that you haven't seen before. So you're constantly entering new worlds of unknowns, which again is why you never get to zero. You never get to zero incidents, because as you go down, the curve kind of goes lower, lower, but it never touches zero.
And you get worse ones, bigger ones.
Yeah, it's a bit of a paradox. By fixing the ways that it can go wrong simply, you leave only the ways that it can go wrong in a complex fashion. When I was a consultant, you'd go into a company and they're like, oh, we had an outage because the disk filled up. And I'm like, oh man, how good would it be to have outages where just the disk filled up? That would be great. I have an outage because like this person over here forgot that this person over here existed, and then they built something 10 years ago and they interacted in an unforeseeable fashion. I'm like, God, why can't disks just fill up? That would be easy. It's like, no, I automated away disks filling up, and so now I have to deal with this.
Yeah, no, makes sense. So we've got only 9 minutes left, so I'm going to rush through. Only 15 questions left. No, joking. On that note, there's a bad news for all of you. And it's an article I definitely recommend you to read. It's called How Complex Systems Fail by Dr. Richard Kirk. And his point is all our systems always run in degraded mode. The only reason they're operational is because of the people who are watching them day after day after day. So we are always running in that degraded mode. What was interesting for me in all of these conversations, I think it was the approach to fix this matter of resiliency and reliability by investing in technology only. Maybe apart from Marek that talked about people. So and the challenge I have for the panel is the system. When we talk about the system that train lines run, is it just a technology, or is it technology and the people, and where the boundary?
And process.
And process.
Could I add to that? How do you quantify the value behind each people, process, technology?
So doing it is, I was told to last minute. Yeah.
How do you
I remember
quantify
that.
Is it actually?
Yeah,
How do you quantify the value behind people, process, and technology? As to where you spend your time, your money, your resource.
I mean, it's a really good question. I think that times where whoever shouts the loudest are gone, but that's basically is based on the previous incident or stuff that we know gonna hurt us the most, right?
Yep.
The severity is like, if you have an organization where you have the highest kit, but you have people that are fresh out of uni, nothing against uni people, they are just trigger happy to click anything, you need to spend money on training them or buy skills from the market, right? If you basically have a bunch of perfectly equipped individuals, but they have no system, like how many great football teams do not operate well, but they have only superstars and they not win anything because the process doesn't work, right? So it all depends on like what level of maturity you have on each and what kind of problems you face. And that's kind of will then define whether you're gonna spend more time, money, effort, talking to people, going on a shopping spree, or just basically sitting down saying, you're all brilliant, but you're all, in big hectic mode, right?
So then how do you create that accurate quantification of how each area is performing?
A lot of talking and a lot of observation and a lot of like lessons learned when you, like if you go as a fresh person, for example, go to the company, right? Personally, I would not change anything for the first months unless I'm going to be told, hey, we have a dire problem here, right? So I have an indication. If I would not know and I'm going to be like fresh, I would basically have a bunch of interviews with stakeholders, have a chat with like operators saying, talk to me about your daily routine, what you operate, what's your problems. And I'm going to formulate slowly my own opinion. And then if the incident will happen, then I will be like, okay, now let me step back, not show the team like how great I am, right? Because I know this. I want to see how you guys operate, right? And then I'm gonna see that and learn of that, and then I would have enough information to make an educated guess.
I think there's a Google stat which says that like 70% of incidents are caused by a change, and off the back of that, I think if you're again studying the correct metrics on that situation, you can see where perhaps you've got areas of the business where you're having just more problems. And at that point, then you can start just checking the processes there, checking the teams themselves, whether they've had enough education. So I mean, we will run workshops on deployment processes. We'll run workshops on incident reaction processes for individual development teams. So there's that kind of combination of, again, kind of like spectrum of different approaches to sort of finding those weaknesses and trying to just kind of enable slightly better behavior.
I think one of the things, Hamid, you said that like we've spoken a lot about technology. And I think that there's a bit of a paradox. When I was preparing for this, I was thinking a lot about it. I think there's a paradox between what we think will give us confidence and what actually gives us confidence. Because we've been talking about as application owners, not so much as infrastructure people, SLOs and stuff like that. Whereas if you're changing like the core networking, you don't care about the SLOs because if you break it, it breaks every SLO. Like, it doesn't matter. So one thing I was like, well, the thing that gives me confidence after I have an incident is we go through it and then I implement a check or an alert or something, and that gives me confidence that next time it won't happen again. But it also creates an organizational barnacle. Like every alert is a barnacle, every process is a barnacle, everything has cost, all regulation has cost, all process has cost, everything has cost. And eventually, as you add more and more things to this process, there's more and more barnacles on the ship to the point where you cannot move. There's so much friction to do anything that you're just stuck. And adding process will inevitably do that. There will always be, it is a barnacle, there's no way around it, it's just, is that barnacle worth having? And one thing I realized was like, I do actually legitimately feel better when I create an alert after having an incident. But also I know that I fixed the bug that caused that incident. That alert is probably never going to fire.
You're fighting the last war.
Right, but it does make me feel better, but it shouldn't because it's never going to friggin' fire. And if it does fire, it's probably going to fire for the wrong reason. And it's now an opportunity for a false positive that I've now created, which is probably not going to help me. And it was interesting that like, it does make me feel better, but I know it shouldn't. And that like confidence, I think the place to measure confidence is not after, in hindsight. The place to measure confidence is before you click the button. Like, am I confident that this is going to work? And if I'm not confident that it's going to work, what information do I need to make me confident? And if I am confident it's going to work and it doesn't work, what was the gap? Measuring confidence after the fact is just, I think, a fallacy. It feels good, but I think you're just like adding barnacles, being like, yeah, this is going to help, and then you just more and more drag, and then you can't move.
I love how Dylan, you said the word confidence so many times, and I always translate that in my head to managing anxiety, because that's kind of what we do in security. It's like confidence is the word that I usually not use at all. It's more about making sure that people have less anxiety than they normally do to kind of make a change, invest in something, make a decision, right? Because a lot of times what I do and what people in like products do, we go opposite ways, right? Because for me, it's like, let's make it secure. For you, it's let's make the customers use it the most, right? So when availability meets security, then we are not best friends anymore.
But you have to do a product versus technology.
It's coming, isn't it? I was thinking about it. Okay. So we ran out of time. I just want to wrap it up with a metric that I would want to offer to everyone here, an audience, and a question. And that is, so again, coming back to resilience versus robustness, and we talk a lot about how to make technology more robust. But at the end of the day, I think when all these defense barriers fall down one after the other that you build in your technology, it comes down to your people who will save the business. And we don't have many metric in our industry which tries to drive a behavior or track how our people are getting more and more resilient. And I'm going to offer one, which is how often your post-incident reviews are voluntarily read by your engineers and talked about, because that's where really rich learning comes about. But let's wrap up today's panel with something more fun, okay? What is the most stomach-wrenching incident you have faced? Tell a story.
So
Marek, you're ready. Go on.
I have two. One was, and I think every person that was a husband knows, is when I was told by my wife to do something and I forgot. And in my professional life, I tend to be responsible for vulnerability management. And I did not know the IP ranges, and I scanned them. Yeah. So then there is this small little printer that prints the packaging for drugs, right? And when you scan it, it doesn't know that you're scanning it, so it do a buffer overflow and it stopped printing the packaging, which basically means that the drugs are not being packaged, which basically means that the drugs are not being packed on the lorries. That means that the lorries are waiting. That means that the whole manufacturing site that generates 2 million per hour is stopped for 4 hours. And then you know that this was you that actually did that. But I was just scanning the IPs, right? So I wasn't guilty, am I? Right? So that was one time when
Amazing.
I did that.
How did you feel when you?
Oh, that's not the best. I almost kill people with scans, so that's. So yeah, so.
Let's see if any other story.
I got another printer one.
Go on.
Can I keep the printer theme going? So I was at a company as a consultant that will remain nameless, and we were implementing Puppet, the automation solutions, as a previous job. And we wanted to get something done by the end of the week. And so we had this change we wanted to make where currently every server had a password, like the same root password. And what we wanted to do was implement TripleSD so that instead of putting in the password that's like secret knowledge, and when you get inducted into the ops team, they like take you into a room and like whisper it to you and you have to memorize it. Instead, you would use your actual username and password. And when you get fired, you can like be offboarded and all this nice stuff. Anyway, we had tested, we got the approvals, we'd done everything right, we rolled it out, and everything was coming back green, and you could log in with the new username and password, and the old password still worked, which is what we wanted. We could turn that off later. And so it was basically T minus 45 minutes to go into the pub. It was like this, well, earlier than this. But we were just sort of sitting back, and then the phone rings, and someone says, "We can't save PDFs. What have you done? Nobody in the team can save PDFs. The whole team's at a standstill in this financial organization because we can't save PDFs." And I was like, that couldn't have been me. There's no way that like changing the authentication on the back-end Linux servers would stop you on your Windows laptop saving a PDF. Turns out, when they save a PDF, they don't go file, save as PDF, save. They go file, print, PDF, printer, print. And this printer is a physical box which runs Linux, which was put in the data center about 10 years ago, which nobody knew about despite the team being like, there's people that have been there for 8 years, they have a wiki, they have a SIMDB, doesn't exist. It's a physical printer, it's a physical box. All we have is the IP. We SSH to and get the blinking like password prompt. We put in the password, come on, and it lets us in. And so with a bit of like infrastructure paleontology, we worked out, it pretends to be a printer, you print to it, it renders it as a PDF and drops it in a folder and then runs a script which moves it to another folder, which is mounted to a network share, which is mounted to the laptop. So to the user, it saves a PDF to their laptop, but actually it does this horrible dance all the way around the network and back, and we had broken that, and they had to send the whole team home, and it was horrible.
This is like that guy you mentioned 10 years before you who did a thing and you didn't know he'd done the thing.
Yeah. Lives rent-free in my
Let's just
mind.
keep going because at the end I'm gonna ask audience who's the story they love the most. Who's going next? Go on, Jamie.
Do you want stomach wrenching? Okay. So basically, the worst one I've had was, and anyone who's in Chile might have heard this one before, but basically, I used to work for a company that supported small businesses around Oxford Circus, and we had clients in, what is the really fancy place where all the clinics are? Harley Street, thank you, yeah, okay. So we're in there was a couple of clinics that we used to help, and they called us and said, hey, our little, this is like 2005 or whatever, and our little sort of workplace server thing is really, it's got a squeak. We don't like it, we're fancy. Come and sort it out at lunchtime, please, when we have no customers. So I went along on my own and we'd call out the HP engineer and, or Dale, I can't remember, and he arrived, and I was effectively just there to be like the admin guy and say, okay, look, I can shut this down briefly, we can do something. So shut it down, he looked inside and said, I think it's one of the drives. He replaced the drive and it was rated, so turn it on, it should rebuild the drive. Turn it back on, started rebuilding the drive, squeak stopped. Great, gonna go for lunch. A few seconds later, squeak starts again. And we're going, oh, right, okay, obviously it wasn't the drive. So he actually unhooks the size of this kind of like workplace server and starts like using his ear, technical equipment, to get right in there and see where this squeak could be. Reckons it's somewhere near the CPU, looks at the fan on the CPU and basically says, I'm just going to unplug this fan because I think this is the squeak. And I was like, oh, hang on there a second. That fan's got a job. And he said, no, it'll be fine. I'm just going to unplug it briefly. So he unplugged the fan, and within about 3 seconds, the entire server shut down. And I thought, oh, that is not good. He said, don't worry. Plug it back in again. Start it up. Windows Server starts up. Blue screen, heat overload. And then the next thing it says is, I've got a RAID error because it would have normally been all right, but because he'd already pulled the disk out and the disk was rebuilding and it crashed during that, he'd completely bricked this rebuild process. He then went, well, I've got another job. See you later. And exited the building, leaving me with this stone cold server. Soon the guy who ran the business came in, and these Harley Street clinics are like very fancy and nice, but a lot of them are run as sort of small businesses with very kind of like high power people. And I had to tell him, he was like, come on, we've got customers coming in. We've got to get moving. We've got to get things back up again. And that was the stomach moment. That was just me. My stomach was literally, I'm about to throw up in that bin over there. And I had to turn around to him and say, listen, I'm very sorry, but we're not getting this server back up anytime soon. And his reaction was effectively, what have you done? What have you done? I'm losing thousands of pounds every minute. Which didn't help. So I then got on the phone to my boss in a bit of a state. My boss got on the phone to Microsoft, and he basically paid for like the most platinum support we could get our hands on.
To get it sorted.
And I eventually got on the phone to their support. Interestingly, from this, the social thing is so important. That sort of social technical thing, even that sort of emotional thing. When I saw my boss walking down the street coming to the clinic, I was just like, oh, thank goodness, support. And then I got on the phone to Microsoft, and I basically had to be talked through the Microsoft Hive, which is not something you want to get talked through, because I didn't actually know at that lower level how the Microsoft operating system works, and most people don't, because they don't really let you know. And we, after quite a while, we eventually rebuilt this entire operating system. I think it was by about 2 a.m. in the morning, I had the thing back up again, and I left the building and went and got some lunch.
Did the squeaking stop?
The squeaking did stop. It was
Well, that's the main point.
You guys still work?
Yeah, we stopped the squeaking once we realized it was the fan, and we could get a new fan later. But the point was, yeah, the intensity of that. I mean, I'm almost reliving it a bit here. It was awful.
Yeah, I can see it from your face. So Pavel, you got 30 seconds, your story.
Oh, the quick one. It was when the Google frontend burned like a couple years of error budget in a single incident. So I wasn't directly in that, but I was very close in that because the certificates are integrated with the load balancer. And that's also when I learned that, like there is no simple cause. Like it wasn't really the attack. It wasn't really a clear trigger. It wasn't a number of the common things. It was really the incentives that were behind it. And it really got me thinking.
Good, great. So thanks everyone for your time. Thanks panel, Marek, Pavel, Dylan, and Jamie sharing your insights in the panel. And let's